So, today we're going to dive into the mind of a 4th century thinker who, right in the middle of his deepest grief, decided to take on the biggest questions imaginable. What really happens when we die? What even is a soul? And how in the world can a body that literally turns to dust ever come back together? Get ready, because this is the absolutely profound vision of Gregory of Nyssa.
All right, so here's our game plan. We'll start with the personal story, the grief that kicked this whole thing off. Then we'll get into the big intellectual battle he was facing, Plato versus the resurrection. After that, we'll see his game-changing new definition of the soul, how that explains the body's return. And we'll finish with his most mind-blowing idea, the restoration of, well, everything.
You know, every big idea has a story behind it, right? And for Gregory of Nyssa's masterpiece on the soul and the resurrection, that story doesn't start in some stuffy library or a quiet study. Nope, it starts with heartbreak, a moment of really, truly profound personal loss.
So the book itself is set up like a conversation, a dialogue. And you have to understand, Gregory wrote this almost right after his older brother died. And not just any brother, but the famous Basil the Great. So yeah, it's this incredibly deep philosophical work. But at its heart, it's a man trying to make sense of losing someone he loved.
So we can actually pinpoint this to a really specific time. Basil dies in 379 AD, and boom, within just a few years, Gregory writes this. This is so important because it shows he's not just playing around with abstract ideas. He's wrestling with the raw, fresh pain of grief, and he's desperately trying to find a hope that makes sense, a hope that can satisfy both his Christian faith and his very sharp philosophical mind.
Okay, so this personal tragedy forces Gregory to face a huge intellectual problem head-on. You've got to picture it. He's living at this massive crossroads of ideas. On one side, you've got the powerhouse of Greek philosophy, and on the other, the core beliefs of his Christian faith. And they were on a collision course.
And this is the absolute core of the problem. All the big thinkers of his day, the ones steeped in Greek tradition, they all thought the soul was this immortal, non-physical thing. But Christianity, it was promising something wild, something totally different. Not just that your soul lives on, but that your actual physical body will be resurrected. So the question is, how on earth do you make those two things work together?
These two camps were on completely opposite sides of the universe. In one corner, you have the Greek Platonic idea. Your body is basically a prison for your pure immortal soul, and the whole point is to escape it. But in the other corner, you have the Christian idea. Your body isn't a prison at all. It's an essential piece of who you are, something God made and will one day restore. These two worldviews just seemed impossible to reconcile.
So, what does Gregory do? He can't just pick a side. He needs to build a bridge between these two worlds. And his solution? Well, it was just stunningly creative. He decides to tackle the problem at its root by completely redefining what a soul even is. So he asks this really fundamental question. If the soul isn't just a ghost in the machine, some phantom pilot steering a body around, then what in the world is it? What's its real relationship to this body that it's so obviously and intimately tied to?
And here's his answer. It's genius. He defines the soul by its relationship to the body. See, it's not some separate thing just passing through. It's the very force that gives the body life, the power to think, the ability to see and feel and hear. From the very beginning, they are fundamentally woven together.
Okay, let's break this down a bit. First, he argues against Plato. The soul doesn't exist before the body, God creates them together. Second, yes, it's immortal, but it's also the organizing principle that makes your body yours. And this part is absolutely crucial. For Gregory, your soul is uniquely and forever tied to the specific atoms, the specific elements that make up your one and only body.
Now, this new definition of the soul, it's the key that unlocks the whole puzzle of the resurrection. It provides a direct, almost mechanical explanation for how it could work. If the soul is truly bound to its body's elements, that opens up a pretty incredible possibility.
But let's get real for a second. This is the big practical problem, right? What happens when a body decays, or gets eaten by animals, or is scattered to the four winds? How can it possibly come back together? It sounds impossible. And this, my friends, is where Gregory's idea gets really, really cool. He explains it with this beautiful analogy. Picture a painter. That painter knows her colors inside and out. She can look at a messy palette and pick out the exact shade of crimson or cobalt she needs, right? Well, Gregory says the soul knows its body's own elements with that same
perfect, intimate knowledge.
So here's how he says it works. Step 1. When you die, your soul doesn't forget a thing. It holds onto the memory, the perfect blueprint of every single particle that once made up your body. Step 2. It can recognize its own colors, its own atoms, no matter where they've been scattered across the universe. And then, Step 3, at the resurrection, the soul calls those elements back, reclaiming them and reassembling them into the person you've always been. Your identity is never, ever lost.
But Gregory doesn't stop there. His vision of restoration just keeps expanding. He thinks, okay, if God can restore one single person, what does that mean for everything? And that question leads him to his most controversial and maybe his most beautiful idea of all.
I mean, think about it. This is the ultimate theological question. If God is perfectly good and all-powerful, what's the deal with evil? Does it just last forever? Does hell go on for all eternity? Is a part of God's own creation just permanently cut off from him? The logic of Gregory's own system pushes him toward a pretty radical answer.
He brings up this concept with a big Greek name, apokatastasis. Don't let the word scare you. The idea is actually pretty simple, but it is incredibly profound. It means the final, universal restoration of all created things. We're not just talking about people here. We're talking about all of creation eventually being brought back into perfect harmony with God.
See, for Gregory, evil isn't a thing. It's not some dark substance floating around. It's just a lack of good, like darkness is a lack of light. It's a choice to turn away from God. And because it isn't a real thing, it can't last forever. He believed that in the end, God's overwhelming goodness would be like a refining fire, healing and purifying everything. And that means everything. All of creation, even souls that had turned away, would eventually be drawn back to the good. Evil, in the end, just fizzles out. It ceases to exist.
And you know, this quote from the scholar Catherine P. Roth just hits the nail on the head. It perfectly sums up what Gregory was all about. This was a guy who was not afraid of philosophy, not afraid of the science of his day. He just saw them as tools. He courageously took the best thinking available and used it to understand his faith more deeply because he was convinced that reason and faith weren't enemies. No, they were partners in the search for truth.
And that really leaves us with something to think about, doesn't it? Look, Gregory's ideas about biology and physics are, well, they're from the 4th century. But his intellectual courage, that is absolutely timeless. In our world today, a world that is so often tearing itself apart by pitting faith against reason, maybe, just maybe, there's something we can learn from a thinker who dared to believe they could be one.